Number one, I would make sure that the legislature fully funds QBE in Georgia so that public education would be funded 100%. If we fund education 100% in the state of Georgia, we won't have furlough days. We won't have to let go our service workers, like our bus drivers, our food service workers, our custodians, who are a very big and important part of public education. We wouldn't have to worry about vouchers and charter schools, private charter schools, because we've got to put our money where our mouth is. We have to fund public education 100%. Our children are worth that. I have 4 who graduated from the public schools, and they're doing their dreams. I have 1 who just graduated from boot camp out in San Antonio, Texas. I have 1 who's a presidential scholar over at Tuskegee University. They're not just rocket scientists, but they went to public school with teachers who taught them, who cared about them. Even though teachers were furloughed, they're the professionals. Teachers are professionals and they do their job.
All right, Valerie, quickly, what would you do to
I will be very
reduce
quick.
class size system?
You've heard it. I know that money does not fix everything, but you have to have the resources in order to hire the teachers to do it. As a school board member, I knew how hard it was to not have the personnel that you need in place. So of course that does. But I would restore the funds, get rid of austerity cuts.
Yes.
One thing I want to do is take your public officials on a tour around Georgia so they can look at the children and the schools that they're affecting by when they're robbing them. That's the first thing I do. The second thing I do, hey, we need to look at how we're structuring our school district. I work in a district and we're this way at the top and small at the bottom. We don't need a coordinator and executive director. We need teachers. We need teachers so we can reduce the class size so we can get our students' attention back. This is not hard, people. We need to cut out the politics and focus on the children and make decisions based on what the children need, period.
Beginning in the first place, just follow the Constitution. Now, the Constitution of Georgia says that we're obligated to fund public education. So, I mean, it's real simple. Our General Assembly, they just need to, put on the pants and say, hey, we're going to fund education. It's not that hard. They have the money to do that. For me as a businessman, I have X amount of dollars. I pay my bills first up front, and especially the ones that are constitutionally obligated. And secondly, thirdly, with our funding formula, our funding formula now basically drives school systems to do things based on finances. What we need to have is a funding formula that drives schools to do things that are based on educationally sound, what's best for the kids. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with all of the funding. I think we need to look to Florida as a model for having student assigned. But I also think we need to look at local freedom. AP classes, affording the local communities, having a forum class for our AP students, that then would free up having smaller classes in other areas where our students have class sizes. We can raise the class size for our AP courses, and then in turn lower the class size for our students who may struggle a little bit.
Okay, and I'm going to say that Ms. Dent has taken my line, so I just added to it, because children should be first in every incident. And what I would say is that as a state school administrator, not only just walking the state school administrative executives through the halls in the schools, but make it something they have to do quarterly, so that they forget, that they will not forget those faces that they see in those halls. And what I say is to work backwards. Just like they told us to teach back with the child in mind, let's work backwards. Let's go ahead and fund everything that we need for our children first, and if there's money left for administrative, where we're so top heavy with the administrative, then we can hire administrators. But we start with children first.
First and foremost, I would fix our very broken funding formula. It has to be revisited. We've not met our promises to districts since the 80s. And so that would be the first thing. The second thing that I would do is give districts flexibility in how they spend SPLOST dollars. Currently, our law prohibits districts from spending those funds on anything other than capital projects. And I think one of the challenges that we've created at the state level is not giving districts the flexibility to make decisions that are in the best interest of their students. And so I would we had a bill this session and I supported it, but I would make sure that bill was passed so that districts had the flexibility to decrease class size, and do anything else that they thought was in the best interest of their students.
A parallel question, I think, not finance. And we'll start with Richard. You're the state school superintendent. And there is one state control over local schools that you could eliminate. What would it be?
One state control over,
One policy, one rule, one law, one whatever.
over local control. You know, I think anything that, and this is kind of a general grouping, would be any unfunded mandate. If the state or federal government wants to pay for something, then they pay for it. What we have found in the past is that when I started school, that the state was actually paying about 60% and the locals were now 40%. Well, now it's flip-flop. It's almost inverse with that. So any unfunded mandate, you know, basically is a strike against what we would have. So that's the way what I would address.
Tracy, what would you change?
The SPLOST. I think that it makes no sense to build a school that's $147 million and then we have 40 kids in a classroom. We need to reappropriate those funds and send them back to the classroom. That's what I would change.
Okay, Bob.
I would change the teacher evaluation process, and the reason I would do that is we spent 3 years in the city schools of Decatur working with our educators, with our teachers, with our administrators in our building, getting their heads wrapped around an evaluation process, and our community members as well, getting their heads wrapped around our evaluation process, only to have an evaluation process pushed down on us. And I dare say the process that we worked on was way better and fairer to everyone involved. So I would give it.
Okay. Denise?
I would definitely get rid of unfunded mandates. And as Valerie said, the teacher's keys as well.
Ask the question again, I'm sorry.
You can eliminate one state control or policy that's over local schools. What would it be?
The fact that we don't spend enough money on the local system.
Funding?
I don't believe that the burden should be placed on the local system, that funding should go back should come from the state instead of the local systems being forced to pay another tax, especially somewhere like DeKalb where we had a problem with foreclosures. So we don't really have the tax money and the tax base there. So I believe that the state should spend more money on the school system.
Okay. Lisa? What would you change?
As
Get that
many-
right? That's it, right?
Yes, Alicia. As many challenges as we have and have been illuminated tonight, the thing that I would eliminate is seat time waivers. It's time for us to think about the future of education and meeting the needs of our current students. We have decided by state law that a student must be in a seat for a certain amount of time, whether they've mastered the skill or not, whether they are proficient and are ready to move on or not. For example, we have students in traditional public schools who take online courses, and let's say they're taking a history class and they finished earlier than the traditional class. Well, they currently have to just sit in that class, being idle without being able to move on to the next course. And so we have students who are gifted, who are interested, and technology engages them. And so why not give them the opportunity to move on when they're ready to take the classes that are of interest to them, that help them meet their credits and help them become more college and career ready. So we got to take the reins off of how we've been educating for 50 years and do, again, what's in the best interest of kids, and innovate and prepare our students for a 21st century education system.
Did you say state?
You're going to get to eliminate a state rule, law.
I was gonna say, let's eliminate the federal laws first, but, so that we can put
I
all,
think since you're the state school superintendent, let's start there.
okay, I'll start statewide. Fix that problem later, right? I would probably change, the way we, allocate funds to schools. The laws that abide by that, and I would give the state school superintendent a little bit more power where it comes to funding as opposed to what it currently is.
What would you do?
Me? You know, I'm tossing between two. One is for the little people and one is for the big people. So I'm going to go with the big kids. I would make the HOPE scholarship a reimbursement plan instead of a pay it forward plan. And since this is rapid response, you can look at my website online, KiraWillis.com, and it explains it for you. 40% of our freshmen lose the HOPE scholarship their first year. Look at it. We will save Georgia millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Okay, I have I'm going to be greedy here. We got 10 minutes to go, and I promised to end on time, but this is a good question, and I think it is. So I'm going to ask it and ask you to maybe just as quickly as you can. What's wrong or right with the Common Core?
Me. I'm probably the only Democrat who is not 100% on board with Common Core, and it almost cost me some support. The reason being is because as an educator, I research everything as it relates to students. I have been looking at Common Core before I even decided to become a state school superintendent candidate. The arguments for Common Core are not strong enough to keep it in terms of the arguments against it. I was just speaking with a math teacher at my
Can you
school
just give us
yesterday.
a quick?
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not
The
going to
thing
get
is,
to do your
instead of
closing
saying
statement.
1 + 1 = 2, the way we used to teach it, you have to say 1 + 1 = 2, and why is 1 + 1 = 2, and then explain other ways to get to 2 other than 1 + 1. There are a lot of issues behind it. We have it, the governor picked it. I can't just go and dismantle it once I become state school superintendent, but I need to make sure that teachers are prepared, that there is not going to be used as a way to fire them, and that is effective for student education.
We're going to go faster. Rita? With Common Core.
What's wrong with Common Core?
Or right.
What's right with Common Core is it's very similar to what we just had before Common Core, which is GPS. What's wrong with Common Core is the implementation process across the board.
Valerie?
What's right with Common Core is the rigor, and what's wrong with it is the implementation process.
Bernice?
What's right with Common Core is the literacy components it's added in the writing across the curriculum. What's wrong with Common Core is that it lacks a component for our special ed students.
Okay.
Again, what's right with the Common Core, it's broad awareness of education across the state and across our nation. What's wrong with the Common Core? If we're going to improve education in Georgia, we've got to be able to control it.
Here?
What's right with Common Core is that there is a specific reach of standards, and every child should have this standard. What's wrong with Common Core is that oftentimes we stop at that standard, and what we need to be doing is raising the bottom and pushing the top, and not just stopping at the standard. We got to push the top.
Okay. Rita?
What's right with Common Core, I would say, is that we have a baseline to start with education across the board where we're doing the same thing. What's wrong with Common Core, and to add to that, so that any child going anywhere in the state, they would be studying and learning the same thing. What's wrong with Common Core is it lacks rigor. It gives you points for getting something halfway right, not accurately and correct. It lacks rigor at every level. It is more of a cookie cutter, and we need something to be more personalized, more individualized. And it also tests special ed children. They have guidelines for them.
What's right with Common Core is that we have high standards and high expectations for all of our students, and you can compare across states, so we no longer are focused on just what's happening in Georgia, and we will know if students are competing statewide and nationally. And as a mom, I see it at the kitchen table. So what's right is watching my first grader use critical thinking skills to solve math problems, English language arts, and across curriculum. What's wrong with Common Core, two things. Number one is that teachers don't have the resources that they need to properly implement. We've done a good job in terms of spending race to the top dollars, but it has not been enough in every classroom to make sure all teachers know what to do. What's also wrong is that we've allowed anti-Obama folks to turn this into something that it's not. And we've allowed people who have no rational thinking whatsoever to hijack what is really high standards and about doing what's best for kids and turn it into something that has everything to do with politics. And so we've got to do a better job, those of us who know how important Common Core is, to take it back and make sure that this focuses more on students and doing what's in their best interest.
Anyone have a comment they'd like to make? You obviously got this going well with your question. Okay, it's time to close and have closing statements as promised. I don't know where to start. I'll start with Ternisha. How much time does she have?
A minute.
A minute?
do I have any educators in the audience? First of all, I want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for your commitment, and I'm honored to be among your ranks. Thank everybody for coming tonight and listening to us. Being state school superintendent is the work that I want to continue. It's the work that I started years ago in DeKalb County, I continued in Rockdale, and I now do in Atlanta Public Schools. Think about this when you go to the polls. What superintendent will you see again? That will be me, because I won't stay in the ivory tower making decisions blindly without talking to my districts. When your children come home and say, hey mom, that lady with the smile on the poster, she came to my school today. Because I need to be in the school districts to make decisions. I have trained, I have talked to teachers, I work with administrators, I know what we need to do, and I know how to get people on board. And as a Democratic candidate for state school superintendent, I stand before you proud and humble, but ready and willing to work for the students of Georgia. I'm talking about the students with the low income and the students with the high income. So on May 20th, when you go to the polls, it just makes sense to vote for them for state school superintendent. Thank you.
Remember, y'all have a minute now, or we'll be late. Bell rings at 8:30. Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to thank you all for great questions, hard questions, great questions, the best that I've heard so far. I want to be your state school superintendent because I've spent my life working in the development of policy and implementing policy, so I get it. I understand how to do that. I want to be sure that we are providing rigor for kids in every community. I've said this earlier, in every community across the state. I want to be sure that we create great schools everywhere, and there is not a need for parents to feel the need to leave their own communities. I want to be sure that we are providing the support and the professional development to the teachers in the classroom and the administrators such that they are able to do their jobs and do their jobs effectively. I want to be sure that we are engaging our parents and our communities and bringing them back to the table to be a part of the education process. But I also want to be sure that we are helping leaders to understand that teachers and the professionals in our buildings for public education, they meet children where they are every day. They are on the line facing all of the inequities that are out there in this world and the social strata that these kids have to face. And those teachers are doing the hard work that our leaders and our legislators won't do. They won't face the issues that these kids bring to school. And we are doing that, and we are doing a good job of that. And they need to invest in it because public education is a cornerstone of our democracy. And we must do everything that we can do to make it right. I want to be your state school superintendent because I believe in public education. Thank you.
I'm Denise Freeman again. I believe in public education. For 27 years, I've traveled the state of Georgia, working with parents, working with teachers, working with community leaders. I remember back about 15 years ago down in Darien, Georgia, McIntosh County, there was a school teacher who was let go because she wouldn't do something wrong. So I traveled from Lincolnton down to McIntosh and spent 3 months down there. We went to court, we lost at the local level, we won in Superior Court, and we won again in Appeals Court. I did that because I believe in teachers. I believe in the profession. I believe in their commitment and what they do every year. This economy, we have lost over 7,000 educators via cutbacks. That's not acceptable. That's why classroom sizes have soared. We've not only lost teachers, but we've lost custodians and bus drivers and food service workers who also make up our public education system. I will continue to fight and work, just like the little teacher who was just let go in Lincoln County, Georgia, because of her test scores. And then when she got her test scores back just this week, she was down 6% from last year. This year she was up by 11%, but she had already been not given a contract. I will fight to make sure that no teacher leaves because of unfairness due to test scores.
I am running for state school superintendent because as a classroom teacher, I understand what is going on. We do teach in the classroom, and for people to say that we need to have more rigor, that is just a catchphrase that people use when it's time to get elected. We do work hard every day. As an educator, in terms of Common Core, my job is not to dismantle Common Core, but I want to make sure that it's used appropriately on every level, that teachers have the best training, that we have mandatory pre-kindergarten in this state to decrease the achievement gap in this state. If students are going to, or teachers are going to be held accountable based on test scores, understand 50% of our evaluation will be based on test scores. And if we're going to use Common Core tests, then the students need to be ready, the teachers need to be supported. All children need to start school at the same time so that they can be on the same playing field for the most part, so that teachers can do what they need to do to help them pass those particular tests. I'm running for this seat again to protect and improve public education. I am a public school teacher. I have been for 24 years. I understand teacher keys. I understand testing. I understand why children drop out of school. Please, don't let this be a decision, whether you vote Republican or Democrat. Please make sure it's someone who understands what we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. Remember, Rita the teacher, Robin Zine, please vote for me May 20th. Thank you.
You want to close? Closing statement?
Sure. Again, my name is...
You get 1 minute.
Again, my name is Alicia Thomas Morgan. And the question really tonight is, what kind of education do your children deserve? And where do you see our education system going in this state? The state school superintendent is a leadership and policy-making position. And you have to have someone in that office who has a sense of urgency to fix education, not in 20 years,